One of the times we couldn't get it past the triggerfish, get to the snapper.
May I have your attention, please? We're hereby calling to order the Ascension Parish Home Rule Charter Revision Committee. We will start off with the invocation and then followed by the pledge. We're going to ask Reverend Burnett to please lead us in prayer, and we're going to ask Councilman Dawson to please lead us in the pledge thereafter.
All heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord God, for this gathering tonight, Lord God. We pray that this meeting goes decently and in order, Lord God, and let us get accomplished all that you've called us to do, Lord God. All these things we're asking you, darling son Jesus.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. Please keep in mind that we will have only 50 minutes to conduct the business of the committee this evening because there are two meetings that will follow our meeting once we adjourn. So it is 2 minutes after 5 as we speak, so we'll move forward into the agenda. Before we entertain the first public comment, I would like to please ask everyone that from this point on, quite naturally, we will continue to follow Robert's Rules of Order, but we're going to ask each and all members, please, only when recognized by the chair, you should then speak. Any outburst or speaking out of order will not be entertained. So from this point on, we're going to assert the proper decorum. And we're asking for your full compliance with the request. Couldn't find a word, y'all. But anyway, okay, with that being said, this evening, let's do the roll call, then we'll get back to the agenda.
Mr. Dawson.
Here.
Mr. Burnett.
Here.
Mr. P.T.
Here.
Mr. Trosclair.
Here.
Mr. Jarrow. Mr. Kazare.
Here.
Ms. Casso.
Here.
Mr. Lawler.
Here.
Mr. Martinez.
Here.
Ms. Laurent.
Here.
Mr. Hernandez.
Here.
Mr. Lambert.
Here.
Okay. Tonight, this evening, we will hear from the public comment, and we are dealing with Article 4 only of the Home Rule Charter, which has 23 subsections, or 23 sections to it. So first we have Mr. Jeff Pettit, who would like to speak on the sections A, B, C, E.
Can we take them one at a time, sir?
Yes, I'll announce them. But for the record, A, B, C, E, F, H, L, and R. So, Mr. Pettit, would you please start with Section A?
Okay, my name is Jeff Pettit. Good evening, committee members.
Good evening.
We're talking about the composition of the parish council. It says it shall consist of 11 members. The group that I'm a part of and represent, Ascension Citizens Group, we had a wide-ranging discussion on the composition of the council. And it went from increasing it in size to keeping it the same size that it is and to reducing it in size. Another issue or topic that came up during our discussions was, do we want to have full-time parish councilmen or council members, or do we want to continue on with the status that we have now, which is part-time, which pays about $19,000 a year. If we went to full-time council members, would we bump that pay up, and then how would we set that compensation? Does the job demand full-time council members? I think it's worth the discussion. Our group felt it was. When we're talking about, this actually dives into Section 2 also, but it calls for single-member districts in Section 2. But The other thing that came up in section 1 when we talked about the composition of the council was, do we want to continue with single-member districts or single-member districts and at-large or some combination thereof? In other words, at-large council members that would represent the whole parish and single-member districts that would just represent their districts. And then the discussion delved into, do we do 4 large districts for the parish and 3 at-large, reducing the council down to 7? Do we do 10 council districts with 1 at-large? There's all kinds of variations and options, and I think it's worth having a discussion about. One of the downsides, when we do pros and cons about the at-large districts, when we talk about eliminating the office of parish president. So we eliminate 1 parish-wide office, and then we put in 1, 2, 3, 4 at-large parish-wide offices. That's a lot of money going into a race. That would eliminate many qualified people that aren't as well funded as some from possibly being able to participate in the political process. It's something else to consider when you consider at-large districts. The last thing we talked about was term limits, and I'm out of time.
Okay, now for the record, Mr. Pettit went into, well, he actually got 2 sections, A and B, am I correct?
B just ties into A when it came up when it comes to the composition.
Yes, but,
Exclusive and standalone.
okay. Okay, with that being said, the floor is open for discussion or any commentary that any committee member may have on section A or B. Oops, okay. We do have another submission, public comment. Let's go back to the podium with Mr.
Clint Quentin,
Clint Quintmore, but
section 4.01,
section
which is A.
401, that would be, yeah,
Composition.
composition.
That's correct.
Okay, and 402, election.
Correct.
Okay? Let's move forward with composition.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Section 4-01 deals with the number of council persons that will be elected to the governing body. There's been plenty of discussion as to changes being proposed to this section of the charter. These changes include reducing the number of council persons to a lower number. In the discussions, nothing was ever mentioned about going up in numbers, but always about reducing, such as 13 or 15. So I'll limit my discussion on lower number of council persons. The discussion was first proposed by ABA to me. In my opinion, it didn't take them long to figure out that they couldn't push their agenda with this proposal because no one councilman would be willing to give up their seat or elected position. But according to the citizens reaching out to me about what's going on behind the scenes, it is certain that there's been councilman discussion about reducing the number. And more than one person spoke out about reducing it to 7. Also making the positions full-time. The full-time positions I will discuss in section 4-02. What council person would be willing to give up their seats? And how are the citizens affected by this change? Would bigger districts benefit or give better representation to our citizens? I have my concerns. Each community now, basically by percentage or looking at overall area, is assigned somewhat 2 to 3 councilmen per district. Prairieville basically has 2 under that philosophy. Sanoma basically has 2. Donaldsonville basically has 2. City of Gonzales has 2. Would each of these areas be better served by reducing that number to 1? I'm not sure. But I would like to know from this committee how they feel they would be represented as citizens with fewer council districts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, both sections 401, composition, and 402, elections, have been covered or addressed from the public comment by Mr. Pettit and Mr. Quintmore. Any member would like to continue discussion or have any comment on section 401, composition, or 402, election? Mr. Lambert.
I know whatever we do would be possibly controversial, but what would be the possibility of enlarging the districts that would give people who are representing just a small district, say just Sanamo, if you could push them into another area, it would let them have to worry about a little bit more than just Sanamo. And have 2 members at large, that would give you 2 people that would have to look at the concerns of the entire parish. And I mean, we have several council members here, so I hope have some opinions on that. I just think it would give you someone looking at the individual districts, and it would also give you a couple of people who would be looking at a parish as a whole, as opposed to just our parish president. Just comments and food for thought. And I know you got to get into pay, and maybe the 2 full-time people would have to be the 2 councilmen at large may need to be a greater pay scale than the other people, because you surely can't work for $19,000 a year. So just food for thought.
Okay, food for thought. If we want to continue the commentary, we need to at least accept a second, whereby we can open it up for full discussion. Okay, it's been moved by Mr. Martinez, presented by Mr. Lambert, and moved by Mr. Martinez. Next, we have Mr. Lawler.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. From what I see, sometimes we've become a little balkanized on the council, not intentionally really, but it's their own little area. And I think it would be nice to have somebody, 2 people, even 4 people, that look at the parish as a whole and have to answer to the parish as a whole. I think that'd be a really good way of doing things. I do think that the current number of 11 council members is good. And I'm thinking about it from the committee perspective. If you go down to 7 or 5 council people, then really every committee is going to be the full council. You'd be effectively doing away with committees, and then it really becomes quite a burden on people. So I think the number 11 is very good, but I'd like to look at the 2 to 4 at-large council districts, and I'd be happy to allow my district to expand, shrink, whatever it has to do to accomplish that.
Mr. Hernandez.
I guess y'all council members can answer this question. About how many people are y'all? 12,000 apiece? Okay. And that's across the board, Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Lawler.
So that was another good thing to consider, though, because I don't think that this should go into effect until reapportionment. I think that'd be a good time to do it, as you allow reapportionment, you draw the districts at the same time. I think that's something we should really look into.
Yeah, because it's all predicated on the census tracts.
Correct.
Okay.
I guess
Mr.
the only
Hernandez?
thing the only thing I'm concerned about is if you put more than 3 at large and you're willing to pay them, then we're looking at driving up the cost. So that would be something to consider. I don't have a problem with it. It just, we got to look at the costs. See if we're going to do the 3 at large full time and then keep the 8 elected in the districts.
Any further comments? Mr. P.T.
Well, we're talking about a lot of variations here. You've got
Yeah.
full-time versus part-time. You've got at-large versus districts. Maybe this is something where we can use some expert study advice. I'm not sure. Is there an optimal number of constituents for any one representative to represent? I don't know the answer to that, but I would suspect there are some people who have conducted these types of studies. And I mean, we've talked about expertise, and I think this may be a field where I would feel more comfortable hearing from some experts who've actually delved into the facts and the figures and so.
Okay. Well, it's prescribed by law, coming from the Secretary of State's office, as well as, based on your population, your shifts, your movement, where your lines could possibly be drawn, how many folks would go in, 10 to 12 per district, and the necessity to increase or decrease will be based on your population count every 10 years. So if we want to delve into that, we can probably become educated and sensitized to the fact. But keep in mind, I don't think we could do anything besides suggest to the council, but I don't think the council would be able to do anything because it is basically locked in for a 10-year period. So to explore it preliminarily before that time gets here, it may be an option that the council may want to look at. We can recommend to them. Mr. P.T.
Well, I'm not sure we're talking about the same things here. I'm looking at Article 4-01 establishes the composition of the council, and it sets the number. Are you talking specifically about the necessity of a requirement actually to redraw and reapportion lines after every decennial census?
Yes.
But you're not talking about reconfiguring, reducing, or adding council seats. So I don't know if we're talking about the same thing.
Whatever the population would indicate, the population count will then indicate how many folks belong inside of each district. Let's say. No,
I understand that. I
Okay.
understand that. But what we're talking about is, are we going to increase the number of council representatives, or are we going to decrease it? That's up to ultimately the people of Essentia Parish.
Absolutely.
Based upon something that gets on a ballot from the council, and our task, as I understand it, is to make a recommendation for revisions to the council. We've got there's a lot of variations to this. Size of the council, at large, or by district, or some variation thereof, some combination of the two, and whether or not, we hadn't really addressed, I forget which speaker brought it up, but full-time as opposed to part-time councils, that to me would dictate a lot of thought. And I'm sure there are entities out there, some come to mind, that engage in this activity and do these studies. And this is a radical change. This is almost as radical as what ABA is proposing in my mind. We're talking about one branch of government doing a nearly complete overhaul of that, and it seems to me that this is kind of a haphazard way to go about this, because these are new issues to me. I'm kind of off the cuff here, and I think a lot of my fellow committee members are speaking off the cuff here, and I don't, there doesn't seem like a lot of thought has gone into this, but I think a lot of thought should go into this. And I would, if we're going to hire experts, I think this is one of the areas that we should certainly be considering hiring that expert for. Thanks.
Thank you. Any further comments? Further discussion? Mr. Dawson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I've looked at this a little bit. I think what some of the prevalent knowledge is, or guidance is, that you have at least one at-large member. And so that you at least have someone that's concerned about the entire parish. What some of the other counties and parish, what they do is that they have the one at-large, and then that person is the council chair. And usually that person is paid more than the others because of, being that more or less full-time job. So I do believe there is some research. However, when you look at this across the United States, I think it's New York has 100 and something council members. I was in Nashville not that long ago, and I happened to watch them on TV. They have, I think, 40 something council members. It's pretty unwieldy. New Orleans, as you may be aware, I think they're in the 30s, what they have. So, I think you're going to find this, the actual numbers are all across the board because it's, as we see here, it's a political answer to that. Now, if you look at the model charter from, I can't remember the organization right now, but there's a model charter out there, and what it recommends is at least one at-large member. So, I kind of agreed with Mr. PT that perhaps it's something that we should put on the list to review, and that we try to get some more information on this.
Mr. PT?
I want to direct this to the chair, but can you ask Councilman Dawson, maybe I know we're a member of NACO, the National County Association, is that correct? I would surmise, or I would guess that they have done some kind of research with regard to this issue, and maybe they can provide some information and possibly even an expert, somebody who can come and answer some questions, because I'm assuming whatever document we're going to be looking at, I'll have a lot of questions, as I'm assuming most of my colleagues will. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Dawson?
I think it's the National Counties League, or the National League of Counties. They're the ones that have done this model charter, and they've looked at, but, NACO may also have something, but I think we can get some more information on that.
Okay. Well, if it is the consensus of the committee to put that item as a item to revisit, and also look into the possibility of probably bringing some experts in to give some points of relevance as to how we would structure the path that we would take for ascension. So if that's in agreement with everyone, we'll put that as an item to be revisited.
I'll make a motion to that effect, Chairman Weezer.
Okay. Moved by Chairman PT.
Not yet.
I'm not. Committeeman, Wade PT, I'm sorry. And
I'll second.
second by Committee Member Lambert. Any opposition to the motion? Hearing none, motion adopted. Okay, now, next, from public comment, we have Mr. Martinez.
Are we addressing 402? At this point, have we gone?
Yes, I thought that's what we were discussing, 02.
1 and 2.
The one, I'm sorry, composition, you're right. Now, you have comments on the election? Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, on B, each member shall be elected from a district, shall reside in and be a qualified elector of the district. That's all the qualifications there. So somebody can move in for an election and then move out for an election. So, I would like to see at least a 6-month residency requirement there, if not a year.
Okay, we have 6 months or a year. Mr. Hernandez.
But are they gonna be able to move out after the election? They gotta stay in the district, right?
But if they shall be, let's see, how does it say that again?
Shall reside, okay.
Shall reside
Shall have
in.
to be in it. They can move in for a week and then run for office. And I think that needs to be clarified some kind of way.
I'll second that motion. Is that a motion, Mr.
I
Martinez?
made that in the motion for 6 months residence.
6 months.
6 months?
I think you've got some. No, here's 4. 2A.
4A.
Mr. Sadler, which one he?
I'll bring him back up. Okay,
It's Councilman Satterley.
yes. We do have a motion made by Mr. Martinez and second by Mr. Dawson to at least have a 6-month residence requirement for anyone that would want to run for office within the parish. Any opposition to that motion? Mr. PT?
I would make a substitute motion to make that a 12-month or a year period. I think is more appropriate to me, but I know we were just discussing it, so I withdraw that. Nothing's final right here.
Okay, you withdraw. So right now, the motion on the floor is 6 months. Any opposition? Hearing none. Motion passed. Please forgive us, forgive me. We have Councilman Satterley that wanted to make a comment on Section 4A. I'm just getting him, so please come forward. Excuse my oversight.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, it's not an oversight on your part. Let me apologize to the committee. I hadn't actually chosen to speak on one, but since 1 and 2, I think, as Mr. Pettit said, are inextricably connected, you can consider this comment actually to be on both. Because, and another thing that I find hard to do from the audience, obviously we have no way of responding to discussion that's yet to be had. I think it's just part of the way this is, not that y'all can do anything to change it. So questions come up in my mind after we start to hear about, well, is there going to be a discussion about at-large seating or not? If there's not, nothing to speak about. If there is, there is. So I apologize. But I do have some strong feelings about this, and I'm not trying to change what's already occurred. I think it's occurred. I don't know if y'all voted on that motion in a second to bring in an expert. Always bring in someone that knows more than we do. There's wisdom in the group. But I would like in discussions, at least for this panel, to consider 2 or 3 important things. One, most deliberative bodies, as they get bigger and bigger in size and populations increase and so, and you start looking into this, again, I'm not an expert, but I have done some reading, you'll find deal with a district approach and sort of throw the at-large approach away. Gonzales, of course, it works very well. Smaller geographical area, smaller population. It makes sense to have someone, you know, overall. The size of this parish at 20,000 people, not so sure. Number 2, it is a de facto, it is a fact that as a councilman, you have obviously your district hat. In my case, that's around 12, 15,000 individuals in District 4, and you have your larger hat. And we all, as council members, sit, Bill knows this, Terry, Aaron knows it, on finance. In fact, Ms. Castle is the chair. We all sit on the Drainage Commission. So already we're getting a lot of involvement all the way across the board of all the councilmen on 2 major areas I would submit in our parish. How we're going to spend our money, because the council, of course, holds the purse, and, you know, drainage, which we know is a big issue now since the great flood of 2016. And last but not least, my third point I'd ask y'all to consider when you revisit this, with or without an expert, whatever happens, God bless each and every one of you. Lost my train of thought here. Oh, money. Money's always it, right? I see a past president over here. I see one who ran for office. I'm sure they can speak to this issue. I see many perhaps presidential hopefuls up at the dais. At least that's what I read in the paper. It costs a whole lot more money to run a parish-wide race than that large seat that it does a district race, which discourages, frankly, in my opinion, doesn't encourage people to run for the same. So thank you, and I see my time has expired. Mr. Chairman, I'll try to do better and have a card in ahead of time now, if it moves me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Okay, that was commentary from Councilman Satterley. Okay, now we'll move to Mr. P.T.
Thank you. This just occurred to me when Mr. Hernandez, I think what he was starting to ask and didn't get to it was there's no requirement. You can move in 1 week prior and run in the election. What happens if you win election and move out a week after? There is no, in my reading the charter, there's no sanction for that. You don't have to continue residing in that district. And I would make a motion to add a sentence to, no, it doesn't. It says, it talks about, all B says, each member elected from a single district shall reside in the district and be a qualified elector. Other charters, including the language I'm about to make this up, other charters have an additional verbiage similar to what I'm about to read. If any member of the governing authority shall cease to possess the qualification above required, as determined by a court of competent jurisdiction, his office shall at once become vacant. And I would move that we recommend adding that sentence to the end of B.
Further discussion, any comments or further discussion?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Lawler. Okay, now we do have it in motion form. Any opposition to the motion on the floor? Seeing none, it is hereby adopted and becomes a part of Section B of Section 402. Okay, now, moving forward, Section C is that of prohibitions, Section 4-03, which is Section C. We do have Mr. Pettit, who would like to comment on Section C.
Open public comment for 4.02.
Yes, okay, for the record, public comment on 4.02 was, was open, we had a full discussion, but now it is so recorded. Yes. Okay, Mr. Pettit, Section C.
So are we on 2 or 3?
We're on 3.
Okay, prohibitions.
Yes, sir.
There's one thing here that I would like you all to consider is the prohibition on post-membership employment by Ascension Parish. We have nothing in our charter that prohibits that. The section reads, "No member shall hold any other elected public office or other paid public office except the office of notary public, member of the armed services, or the position of principal, teacher, or employee in the public education system." There's no prohibition for a past council member to immediately upon the end of their term to take up employment with the parish. That is something I think we ought to discuss, and I would suggest that we would add something like the following language. No such member shall, during the term for which he or she was elected, in 2 years thereafter, be appointed to any office of profit under the parish of Ascension or any unit of local government. I would like you all to consider that. It seems to me that the potential for a conflict of interest could be there. I would suggest that y'all consider a prohibition on immediate employment once your term is ended. Thank you.
Thank you. Further commentary, Mr. Clint Moore.
Yeah, I know we were trying to throw 4.01 and that's okay. That was quick. I know we were trying to throw 4.01 and 4.02 together, but there's several conversations within those particular two to discuss. So in this particular section, I think it's a great opportunity to talk about making council persons full-time and term limits. What if we had full-time councilmen? What would be their role? How would it be different from their current role? How involved would they be in the day-to-day activities with the administration? I had several conversations with parish employees, none with which I will mention names. On more than one occasion, the term "too many kings in the castle" was said several times. Certain council persons giving orders to parish employees has created a situation that parish employees don't know who to take orders from. This has created a state of confusion with many parish employees. So, there should be some discussion on what this new structure of government would look like, and would the roles be the same. I would also like to address the cause and effects of full-time councilmen. Here's a question to consider. In changing our parish government structure, would you drastically shrink the pool of council candidates to go into full-time positions? Let's take an example of an individual who works at a plant, or basically any other company. Could they go to their boss and say, "Look, I'm considering running for parish council to take my part in my government. If elected, I'm going to need to take a leave of absence for 4 years. And if I don't get reelected, I'd like to come back and work for you. But if I don't, then I'm going to need another 4 years of leave. How many employers would you think would go for that? Would this situation create career politicians in our parish? Who would do anything to keep their jobs, their full-time positions? I would encourage this committee to discuss this at length. We must have a comprehensive understanding of what this type of proposed changes has in affecting. 34 seconds. I would also have a tremendous amount of concern about the public elected chairman, which has been discussed through circles. I think that the councilmen should elect their own chairman each year. I believe this allows the majority of the council to choose their chairman to create a better working environment. Having an elected full-time position chairman, the rest of the council is stuck with, and may cause some type of friction. So I'd also like you to discuss that at length as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've heard the public comments on that subject matter. Any comments or discussion from committee members? Mr. Martinez?
I don't think any elected official can go back to work for the government where they're at. That's prohibited by state law. So as you couldn't go back in a year, I couldn't go back for 2 years or whatever. So that's already to address Mr. Pettit's concern.
Regular corporation. Asking.
I'm just saying by state law, they prohibited from going back. I could not come back to work for Ascension Parish for 2 years, actually. So, and I don't want to come back. But anyway. So, and as far as employees, I wanted to address Mr. Quintmore's comments also. Employees are not supposed to take orders from councilmen. If they do, that it would be automatic termination as far as I was concerned when I was parish president. So, and we did have really, really frank discussions with councilmen as to giving orders. So that just depends on how your leadership.
This didn't occur during your administration.
So I'm just saying that's the way it should be addressed. So, thank you.
And further comment, as far as leave of absence, that's a private sector decision that government has no say-so in. So that would be between that employee and his or her employer. Okay, any further comments? Mr. P.T. and Mr. Dawson.
Are we talking about 4-03 prohibitions now or something else?
Well, we're supposed to be on 403.
Okay.
Mr.
Well, let me, whichever one Mr. Martinez's comments fall under, that's the one I want to talk about. And maybe, as I understood him to say, that state law would prohibit a former council member from working with Ascension Parish. Is that for a set duration? Is there prohibition?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's, 1 year.
1 year, okay. All right. So I know last time, 2 weeks ago, we talked about, or was it 1 week ago, we talked about a 4-year prohibition with regard to the parish president. So I would suggest that half that time may be appropriate, and I would, I think maybe discussing or reserving for discussion a 2-year prohibition on a former council member may be appropriate, and I would make that in the form of a motion for further consideration.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor and need to be second.
Is that to make it 2 years, the restriction 2 years, and is that a year beyond the state law? I'll second that, and we're going to go to, just to bring it back.
Right. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to move from 1 year to 2 year, and by Mr. P.T. and second by Mr. Dawson. Any opposition to that motion? Any opposition? Hearing none, motion is adopted. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, could I?
Yes, sir. Mr. Dawson.
Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to go back. I thought this was in the charter already, but ask Mr. P.D. to look at section 4-20, reference to being a resident elected official. I think it's already causes, it's a reason to forfeit office if they're not a resident of the parish and their district.
Well, I will be happy to, Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'll be happy to withdraw that motion that I made earlier today.
Okay, for the record, I'll read it into for the committee. 4-20, forfeiture of office. Whenever any member of the governing authority ceases to be a qualified elector of the parish, ceases to be a resident of the district he represents, or fails to attend meetings without good cause for a period of 3 consecutive months, or is convicted of a felony as provided by state law, the office shall be forfeited. So that would negate the previous motion that we moved on, as I appreciate it, Mr.
Agreed.
P.T.
Agreed.
Okay. So let the records reflect, and we will strike that. Okay. Hearing no further comments on, or discussions on Section 403, prohibitions, we'll now move to Section D, which is 4-04, compensation. We don't have any. There's no public comments? That has been listed. You do? Okay, we have a public comment coming forward. Okay. Section 404D from Mr. Clint Quintmore.
Dealing with composition of the governing authority, I always thought that councilmen having to vote themselves for a raise was just put them in a very bad situation. So I thought some changes could be made to this particular section, and I think you would need some legal expertise, but I'm not sure. But changing it to where councilmen actually got a yearly adjustment for cost of living added to their pay, and have a one-time adjustment period right before the next election, so that any changes made by that particular vote would go into the next election cycle. I just think it's unfair that every parish employee gets a cost of living raise, and then parish councilmen put in the same time or even same time of work, and they don't get any adjustment for that, and then are therefore forced to cast a vote to give themselves a raise. I just think that's unfair. If you're going to adjust the parish president's pay and set him to a particular criteria, I think you should consider making some changes to the council pay as well. So I'm hoping y'all would open that up for discussion and take a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Further commentary from the public?
I thought I'd put it on there, Mr. Queezer. If I didn't, I apologize.
No, it's not. We have C, then you skip to E. Do you want to
Can I plead
comment
old
on D?
age? Yes, please.
Okay, we'll inscribe it.
Just from public records, well, this is a public document, so, you know, our assessors at $170,000 a year, our sheriffs at $159,000, clerk of courts at $139,000, district attorneys at $150,000, although that is a 3-parish area. Parish court judges are at $152,000, and we have our parish president set base pay at $55,000. I think we need to look at that and compensate the parish president's position for the job that it actually does. Thank you.
You know, this is
Thank
not,
you.
this is not the parish presidents. This is the governing authorities. So.
Correct. Yes, we've already addressed that. Okay. Next comment from Councilman Daniel Satterley on Section 4D, compensation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I got my card in time this time.
Yes, you did.
I'd like to relate to this group a personal experience that's very relevant to number 4. As a new councilman 2 terms ago in 2012 actually, we were sworn in. Within 2 or 3 months of service, the council, because of the existing language, decided, because it hadn't happened in a long time either, to vote themselves a pay raise. I was adamant, as with some other newly elected council members, not to do this. How preposterous could I deserve a raise having been on the job only 2 or 3 months? I have no record, none whatsoever. This is the problem when you have a system where the council votes its own self a raise, can do so, I believe it says, help me Tommy, in year 1, 2, or 3, you can't do it in the fourth year, throw salt over your shoulder, spit in them in, grab the mask on the old long range or whatever. So I do support some sort of at least discussion, if not change to our Constitution, that we consider some sort of, take it out of the hands of the council at least, raised by cost of living or whatever. I know some of my colleagues, I don't know if it's practical, we vote on so many things, so let the people decide that and vote. You might find you never get a raise. I can tell you this, for the job, we've had a lot of discussion already about whether it's part-time and all. I don't know anything about that. All I know is it takes every ounce of my strength. I am an older man, maybe I'm just getting too weak for the job, but I think it's full-time right now. And frankly, for what it pays, I love this expression, I use it all the time. You could slap mayonnaise at a bun at a Burger King and make more money than being a parish councilman in Ascension and have a whole heck of a lot less stress. So again, I don't want to see future council members jeopardized after they get elected because other people, maybe they deserved some of my colleagues that want to do this because they hadn't had one in a long time and they were doing a great job. I don't know anything about that. But if you're a new guy and you're subjected to that, how do you tell your voters you voted for yourself to get that raise? And for the record, by the way, I voted against my own pay raise. Of course, a lot of people said, but you took it, didn't you? So this is a nasty piece of business here, and I would just ask each and every one of y'all to think about it. Okay? Coach, Rodney, Liz, Tommy, Aaron, Terry, all the rest of y'all. This is serious business. I've been a proponent for years about trust. The best way to get the people's trust is for them to believe they're getting the right bang for the buck. Now, last time I was supportive of the president because I think that job is really underpaid, and you're not going to get good people if you don't pay. Same can be said a little bit for the council. So we have to get over this hurdle about are they half-time or the whole time as it is, and what should we pay them? Voting on our raises, not a good idea. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Okay, we've heard the public commentary on section, on D, section 404, compensation. Now we'll entertain any comments from the committee. Mr. Martinez.
Well, I don't think you can give yourself a raise anymore because I think you're at the maximum. So by state law, you can't, the only time that would occur is if the state would move up the pay to save $1,000 a year or whatever, then you would have to vote to give yourself that extra $2,000. To clarify that, if you wanted to do that, all you'd have to do is put a motion in at the highest, the maximum allowed by state law, and then, but if they go up, it don't matter. You don't have to vote on it again.
It's automatic.
Yes, automatic. So
Okay.
that may clarify that.
Thank you for the clarification. Any further discussion? Mr. Petey?
Yeah, the way it reads now in our charter 4-04, that governing authority members shall receive an annual salary not to exceed the maximum amount allowed for police jurors by state law, which is $1,600 a month. There's two versions to do it. You can do it by meeting. The Lawson Act also talks about a salary that is capped at $1,600 per month, which I think that the council vote is at that max already. So if we're going to in any way consider allowing for a raise to the council, we've got to address this in the charter. So, I mean, we've got to change that charter, or unless the legislature decides to change it. But I think we're talking about more than. I mean, listening to Councilman Sadley, it sounded like we're talking about a bigger, more substantial potential raise than just a few $100s a month. I'm not sure where we're going with this or how much we're talking about. And again, this feeds into whether or not we're going to have a full-time council members or not. Because a full-time council member is not going to do it for $19,200 or $25,000. I would not assume. So, I think this merits a lot more discussion.
Okay. Mr. Hernandez?
The only comment I would have to make is that I don't like anything that's automatic. Because out in the real world, in private industry, you don't get anything automatic. It should be performance-based, and I know that's going to be hard to put in the charter, but for just the councilman to get a raise every year, there's a lot of people in this parish that don't get a raise 2, 3, 4 years. So that's all my concern is that we can put something and word something in the charter to where they can get some more money. It's just I don't want to make it automatic.
Okay.
That's my comment.
Any further comments?
550.
If
Yes,
we
Mr.
did
Lambert.
go to state law, like Tommy was saying, it would give us, people would know what they were getting beforehand if it's the maximum the state allows. And government is not the real world, so that doesn't matter, in my opinion. I mean, I think that's an insignificant amount of money when you look at $140 or $50 million budget. What we pay councilmen is not very much money at all.
Okay. For the record, it is now 5:50 members, and we have to conclude our business for today. Could we suspend, if you don't mind, could we suspend this particular section, Section D, which is Section 404,
Motion to
titled
suspend.
Second.
titled compensation. It's been moved by committee member Mr. Lawler and second by Vice Chair Cazo that we suspend the meeting until our next scheduled meeting, and we'll pick up at this particular juncture. Any opposition to the motion?
I agree with you.
Hearing none, it's hereby
Motion
adopted.
to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. Committee of the Whole. Thank you.